Okay, thank you again for being here today at the 2007 Northwest Sunstone Symposium. We very much enjoyed the previous two presentations, and now we're very excited to present to you a panel entitled God Loveth His Children, a new LDS pamphlet on homosexuality. And so without any further ado, well, I'll read the abstract. A new pamphlet about homosexuality appeared on the church's website in late July 2007. The pamphlet is entitled God Loveth His Children, and among other things says that the church does not know what causes same-sex attractions, but does not believe sexual abuse and sexual experimentation in childhood are responsible. It declares that same-sex attractions are not considered sinful, but affirms that acting on those attractions is incompatible with God's plan for families in the afterlife. It urges same-sex attraction LDS members to remain active in the church and asks other members to treat them with love and respect. This panel will discuss the new pamphlet and welcomes a wide-ranging and frank discussion on this important topic. So without any further ado, I would like to turn the time over to Ron Scow from Pocatello, Idaho, who will be the moderator for this panel. So Ron Scow.
Thank you, John. It's always fun to be involved with the Sunstone group. I've been doing Sunstone for 25 or 30 years. I haven't figured it out, but it's always exciting. And it's a little different to come to a Northwest Symposium because, you know, when we're in Salt Lake, we have a variety of choices, and so when I have spoken in the past at a session discussing homosexuality, it tends to draw a particular crowd, and in this particular case, everyone who is part of the symposium is going to be participating. So I've been thinking about that a little bit and realizing that we would like to use this opportunity. I've been wanting for a long time to discuss this in Sunday school. Twice a month I lead a discussion, a home evening discussion for the little branch where I participate. And since this new pamphlet came out, I've been trying to decide whether I feel brave enough to discuss the pamphlet because my lesson material always comes from the Ensign. And so there is a pamphlet, or there is an article in the Ensign this month on same-gender attraction. Well, anyway, with this Sunstone group, we are used to talking with you about homosexuality. And so it's interesting to try to figure out what part of that to talk about. It was interesting to see that when President Eyring got his first question at the press conference a week ago, it was on same-gender attraction. It was on homosexuality. It seems to be very much on a lot of people's minds these days, and it's on the minds of a lot of members of the church. I enjoyed John's session last night over at Molly's home, and the sessions today have been fascinating. Seems like we're talking about a personal crisis of faith in almost every session. And certainly there are elements of this subject that create personal crises of faith for people. They create it creates it for people and for families, and in general it comes to involve all of us. John asked a few questions to the group last night, and I'm going to be brave enough to ask a question or two here. I don't know how comfortable people are to raise their hands, but maybe we'll get a little flavor for what the involvement of the group might be. For example, I wonder how many of you here know someone who is gay or lesbian or transgendered or has a sexual orientation issue. How many of you? Is there? It looks like that's virtually everybody in the room. Maybe a few exceptions. And I would present myself to you as someone who has looked at this very, very carefully over a long period of time. What's exciting to me is I believe that the leaders of the church are beginning to believe this, and they're beginning to put out statements that support the position that I just took. That is, it's not a choice, and it doesn't go away. And I believe that when the members of the church believe as the leaders seem to be believing, that we'll be in a very different place on this issue. But we're just starting to get there. Let me just say, having said that much by way of introduction, that we have a variety of things to discuss here with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about how the church position seems to have changed in the last 20 years. And then we're going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about a personal report. Clark's going to tell us about his experience, and we're going to talk a little bit about the family situation with the Pingree family. So let me just tell you that I have this history with the subject. I began working with it because of some interests that were in my family. My nephew was gay and he died of AIDS. So it became an issue in my broader family. I had a background having had a bachelor's degree at Utah State in biology, a minor in psychology. So I became interested and helped publish Peculiar People. That was in 1991. Let me say a couple of other things that I became involved with, but I'll tell you also at the same time that I'm a father of 5. I'm a grandfather of 12. I'm emeritus professor from Idaho State University, where I teach in the audiology program. I'm executive secretary over home teaching in this small branch that I talked about. And then in terms of other things that I've done on the subject of homosexuality, we created a pamphlet a few years ago called The Persistence of Same-Sex Attraction in Latter-day Saints Who Undergo Counseling or Change Therapy. This is a report from about 5 different sources that describes the outcomes when we look at large numbers of people, including about 800 who had gone to one LDS family services therapist. And so this is one of the reports we pulled together. It's jointly authored by William Bradshaw from BYU and from Mary Beth Raines and from Robert Reese. Bob Reese was a bishop in the Los Angeles area for 5 years, and over that period of time worked with about 50 who were dealing with same-sex attraction. So that was another thing that we did besides this, was that we created a book called A Guide for Latter-day Saint Families Dealing with Homosexual Attraction. And this was sold at Deseret Book for a period of time. This also is jointly authored by the 4 of us that I just described. In addition, we created 3 documentaries that John was good enough to put up on the internet, and these, I feel the message of them is it's not a choice and it doesn't go away. And the good news is, John tells me, the 3 documentaries have now been watched over 100,000 times. So that's pretty exciting for us. One other thing, just to plug Levi's dialogue a little bit, I was involved in writing an article for Dialogue about a year ago, which deals with the subject of mixed orientation marriages. Someone gay marrying someone who's straight. So these are some ways I've been involved, and I am a very avid church watcher. I'm very interested in what the church position is on this and how it's changed and so forth. And so that's what I'll be talking to you about. But we have, in addition to the church position, or the position of church leaders, we have the position of members, and some of the family dynamics that I've alluded to. And so we'll get Clark to tell you a little bit about his story. And Clark graduated from BYU in 2001. He's employed by Wells Fargo, currently living and located in Salt Lake City and soon moving to the Bay Area. Clark has been affiliated with Sunstone for 8 years, and some of you may know that Toby is his uncle, so he's part of this prominent Pingree family. Toby was, of course, the chair of Sunstone for many years. And Clark began the process of being openly gay about 1.5 years ago, so he'll tell us more about that story. Dan Pingree, his brother, has lived in Seattle for 6 years. He's married and the father of one daughter. Is it Britton? And his wife is Kristen, who was at the session last night. Dan says I should announce that he is an avowed heterosexual. And he's a graduate of BYU and Harvard, and he's currently employed by drugstore.com in Bellevue, Washington. So anyway, that's the three of us. Let me just say, in whatever time I have left, that I want to tell you there's this interesting history of the documents that the church has produced on homosexuality, beginning in about 1965 when President Kimball began to publish different articles. This is called Love versus Lust. That's an address he gave at BYU in which he talks about homosexuality quite a bit. Here's Hope for Transgressors, 1970. So Many Kinds of Voices. These are fairly extensive treatments of the subject. That was 1971. Here's New Horizons for Homosexuals, 1971. A Letter to a Friend, 1978. These are very much the same kind of message. I didn't bring his book, but it's what is in here is very similar to Miracle of Forgiveness. Here's Boyd K. Packer, 1976, called Two Young Men Only. And here's To the One by Elder Packer, which he gave at BYU in 1978. Which brings us, in terms of more or less official statements, to a 1992 guide. It has the official stamp of the church on it, the official copyright, and it's called Understanding and Helping Those Who Have Homosexual Problems, Suggestions for Ecclesiastical Leaders. That's 1992, and this is the last thing we had from the church of an official nature until this came out in July of this year. So this is called God Loveth His Children, and it indicates here that it was approved in April, and so then it appeared in July. It's on the church website, and as near as I can tell, this is the new official church position replacing this pamphlet. By the way, we got a new church handbook within the past year, and that church handbook references this guideline, indicating that it was the official position until now. But hopefully when the new handbook comes out, it will reference this one, because in my judgment, this is a great improvement over this one. Just the names would tell you something. Here it's a homosexual problem, and here it's the rather neutral God loveth his children. So, I think maybe I could go through some of the statements in this one and in this one and show you how things have changed and how they've improved. But I don't think we'll have time for that except maybe on a question basis. But let me just summarize it by going through what we handed out, and hopefully everyone has a copy of that. I think the most significant thing in the new pamphlet, let me just add that it seems to me that this new position that has emerged now, just in the last year, came first in the form of an interview with Elder Oaks and Elder Wickman, which was placed on the church website in August of 2006. It was then followed by God Loveth His Children in July of 2007, and then just this month with an article by Elder Holland. So this is in the Ensign this month. If you haven't seen it, you'll want to take a look at it. Those three, I think, were all designed to come out together and to be viewed together. At least that's my assessment of it. I believe that they were carefully designed and carefully approved by all of the apostles and the First Presidency. And so to come back then to what I think is the most important thing that is acknowledged in these three new statements, it's this suggestion that same-gender attraction is a core characteristic of persons. Now, Elder Wickman is the one who said that, but they do, in fact, refer to it as orientation, which it seems to me is a major concession. In other words, up until now, it's often been viewed as a sin or as a problem, but now it is seen as a core characteristic of persons. They do, of course, say that it's not the only characteristic, but it is one, and so I think that's a big and important concession. Number two, the church has no position on nature or nurture with respect to same-gender attraction. And I think that also is very important. If you go back to the statements of the 60s and 70s, they're full of no one is born gay. That particular statement was made over and over again, but you do not find it in these three new statements. The closest we get to that is Elder Oaks in the interview says, "We do not believe that anyone is born with something that they cannot control." So we seem to have moved away from taking a position on whether or not people are born gay, and Elder Oaks and Elder Wickman are very clear that the church has no position on nature or nurture. We also know that President Hinckley in 2004 made a statement on Larry King in which he was asked, "Are people born gay?" And President Hinckley said, "I don't know. I am not an expert on these things. I don't pretend to be an expert on these things." So I think it's pretty clear that they have moved into this place where there's no position on nature or nurture, and that's a very good thing. Part of these statements emphasize attractions alone do not make you unworthy. And that is part of something that's been happening in the church handbooks. But this is the first time it's actually been said in just this emphatic kind of way. Attractions alone do not make you unworthy. The 1992 statement says that people should be able to overcome these feelings, and that if you're righteous enough or do the right therapy or whatever, that this can go away. And so the suggestion is that you're not worthy if you still have those feelings. But here, in these three new statements, we're getting very clearly, attractions alone do not make you unworthy. Number 4, therapy is no longer being promised as a cure-all for same-gender attraction, and marriage is not a cure-all for same-gender attraction. We could go into that, but suffice it to say, those are important things that have been coming, but they're made much more clearer now in these three new statements. Church callings are not denied to those with same-gender attraction, so that goes along with the attractions do not make you unworthy, so you're worthy to hold any church position. This last one, same-gender attraction will be fixed in the next life. As near as I can tell, that is brand new with the interviews in connection with the PBS documentary. That's the first time I think I have ever heard that position articulated, namely that it's all right if it can't be fixed in this life, it will be fixed in the next life. So based upon what we were reading here, that didn't come up because, of course, if you were worthy enough, if you did the right kind of therapy, you were going to be fixed in this life. But now that is not the position, then we have a new suggestion, and that is that it will be fixed in the next life. So there are definitely some concerns about the new pamphlet. I've mentioned a couple of them here. One of the issues is that it really doesn't go beyond those who are still listening and in the fold. It's designed for people who are younger, I think, and for people who have still are in a position that they're responding to the authority of the church. So Clark will maybe introduce us to the issues for someone who has stepped beyond that. But there is one little olive leaf here, and that is that it is there's this wonderful statement in the last paragraph of the pamphlet, which I think is a way to reach out. And I don't know how we as members are going to respond to this, or just what the brethren have in mind when they say this, but they say, no one is or ever could be excluded from the circle of God's love or the extended arms of his church, for we are all his beloved sons and daughters. So my question, I guess, is how will the church and how will the Lord extend his arms to those who have stepped away from the church and who maybe have found a same-sex partner? How will we as members extend our arms to those folks? Well, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think it's time to let Clark tell us his story.